So Tucker Carlson, a lot of people have been giving him some crap, and a lot of people are saying, okay, he's not a conservative, he is not amongst us. Let me full disclosure here with Tucker Carlson, and this is the case with many people at Fox News or in media. I have had some personal interactions with him, so I want to be clear, and so I try and avoid talking about these subjects because of the inside baseball, and I know that I may be biased. Multiple personal interactions, and you guys have probably, you can even search, I know there were some on air, they've been mixed. Now, that being said, I want to make sure that I'm going through the claims in Tucker Carlson's history on the merits. And I don't believe Andrew Breitbart believed in Ronald Reagan's, the 11th commandment, you don't attack your fellow conservative, right? And I certainly don't believe in just attacking people because they disagree with you slightly on an issue. That is different from fundamentally changing your worldview or throwing someone else under the bus who is also conservative and also on board with our cause because you may be throwing a temper tantrum. Now, I don't think that Tucker Carlson always does this. I think that Tucker Carlson has done a lot of good work. I agree with Tucker Carlson's views in a lot of ways. But anytime you have someone who has espoused views that change seemingly with whichever platform is afforded to him at that time, like we have bow-tie version Tucker Carlson at CNN, Crossfire, then we have MSNBC Tucker Carlson, and then we have Fox News Tucker Carlson, we have post-Donald Trump Tucker Carlson. Okay. This is where you get into it. And let's start off with this. Sydney Powell. Tucker Carlson caught a lot of flack because he criticized Sydney Powell's lawsuits publicly and also called her work ethic, or I guess you should say her legal ethic, into question before the suits were even filed. This is what pissed a lot of people off.
We simply wanted to see the details. How could you not want to see them? So we invited Sydney Powell on the show. We would have given her the whole hour. We would have given her the entire week, actually, and listened quietly the whole time at rapt attention. That's a big story. But she never sent us any evidence, despite a lot of requests, polite requests.
First off, Sydney Powell said that they were not polite requests. Now, again, I will say inside baseball, we've invited Sydney Powell on this show, and at that point in time, they were very clear, well, there are some things that we can't discuss because of legality until we file these, and we have to be careful. This was happening behind the scenes here. You didn't see us go, bitch!
Right. But I really wanted
But I really want the scoop.
Polite. Please. We asked politely.
Half-Asian Larry Richmond told me, like, listen, we'll see if we can get Sydney Powell on. But if she can't, I understand because of the legal issues. Maybe we can get her on afterwards. Why would I want to undercut her other than to highlight the fact that they didn't give us an exclusive scoop? We would have given her an entire hour. Oh, really? And that could be admissible? And then she loses? I'm sorry. That was completely off base. It was a shitty thing to do. And it's not something that I would imagine a conservative who wants to win this election would do.
Yeah, as if that's like a really nice thing he's doing for her. Like, we would have given her the whole hour or a week. Oh, that's so good of you.
We asked for her debate prep beforehand so that we could air it in front of her opponents, and she politely declined, and so what a bitch.
And I super wanted it.
And I super wanted it.
Please.
So that's the situation that happened there. And I say behind the scenes, this happens all the time. And you have to try and work with these people, especially when this could be one of the biggest lawsuits in American history, certainly as it relates to election fraud ever. And now we see the evidence that has been provided cumulatively. And if there is not an apology issued, that's an issue. Doesn't mean that Tucker Carlson's voice should be discounted. And it doesn't mean that everyone should tune him out just because you don't like that he did that. But I do think it was a crappy thing to do. Here's something, too, that you need to know about Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson, you see this a lot with people on air. They present themselves as the everyman. You had Bill O'Reilly doing this, like just looking out for the folks. You haven't met a folk in 30 years, okay?
Oh, Bill.
You have someone go out and talk to the folks for you.
Sometimes he walks on their backs.
That's true.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes he has them walk on his back.
Oh, whoops.
Tell the folks to bring me some food.
That feels nice.
So Tucker Carlson was raised, he's kind of the definition when people talk about a wealthy elitist, okay? His dad married into the Swanson fortune, right? This is where he is, basically married to the Swanson fortune. This is a guy who has been... That does not discount anybody's views. But for me, it's if you go, hey, I'm now championing the working class because I understand it, and that's kind of your brand, I think you need to be transparent about the fact that that's not really something that you would really have a whole lot in common with. I think Donald Trump does that very well. Donald Trump seems to care about the little guy in the United States, and he's very clear that he's not one of the little guys, as seen by his penthouse apartment entirely plated in gold. The only man with more gold is Ben Carson. I could not believe when I saw his bathroom in Florida what a pump he was. So... Let's look at Tucker Carlson's views. Again, the reason people have a problem with him as far as consistency. He was a pro-Iraq war Republican for a while before he became sort of what is seen as a quintessential sort of think tank libertarian, right? Yeah. This means that people who work at Cato, people who maybe work at some kind of Liberty Institute for Freedom, Prosperity, insert here, foundation, fund.
That's my favorite.
And he tried to ingratiate himself to the sort of intellectual, conservative, Friedman-type think tank base. Now, when Tucker Carlson was asked in 2003 about the Iraq War, gave a long list of reasons to invade, and then he ended with, what other evidence do we need? And to be fair, Tucker Carlson has been very clear about the fact that his views have changed. I'm not saying that people's views cannot change, but they have changed dramatically. He has made a 180, and he's done it several times, from CNN to MSNBC to Fox News to post-Trump Fox News. And I can say this because I was on Fox News pre-Trump with Tucker Carlson, and it's not the same guy who you're seeing right now. So consistency in this case does matter when you're looking at something that seems like it could actually irreparably harm this investigation from Sydney Powell, which it could.
Yeah, I think it's possible. And look, I don't know that I took it quite the same way that you did when he came out with that. My initial thought was that doesn't seem like the right thing to say. You shouldn't be saying that. But he needed, at the time, everybody was talking about this story, and everybody was discarding this story and saying, there's no evidence. She's just holding press conferences. It's another thing that's going out. So I think he was fine to cover it and say, hey, we've reached out. We've tried to do this. We'll present evidence once it happens. I think where he crossed the line with what you were saying is that he seemed to make a point of the fact that she would not come on the show. Yeah. And he seemed to kind of throw a little bit of a temper tantrum about that. But then he cloaked it in.
And she said that he was rude.
Right. And then he kind of cloaked it in, we hope that evidence comes out. And I think that's true. If he ends up just having a misstep there, fine. But I think what you're saying is there's other evidence that says that probably wasn't a misstep.
There have been a lot of missteps. And then, you know what, I'll give you a little inside baseball with my experience at Fox News. I'm certainly not saying that Fox News tells people what they can and can't say, but sometimes they tell people what they can and can't say.
Allegedly.
He is, a while ago, as a self-described, and it's interesting because he looks older because the bow tie was his gimmick for a while. Right. Self-described libertarian, here he is.
I am a right-winger, sort of a libertarian right-winger, but I'm far out, and I make no secret of it.
Radical man.
Far out, bro.
Far out.
Here he is, bashing those so-called libertarians recently.
Our leadership class remains resolutely libertarian, committed to the rhetoric of markets when it serves them, utterly libertine on questions of culture.
Okay, so this is the issue. Again, these views change depending on where he is, like CNN, MSNBC, where he didn't have really great ratings, and he's been very open about that. I will say this, having worked at Fox News, there certainly is, they don't tell you exactly what to say, but they do tell you which third rails to avoid. This is true of any network. I ran into this quite a bit.
You stepped on a few.
No. As you see with what happened, just look at what happened in the election with Mitt Romney at that point. Rick Santorum was basically persona non grata when it came down to both of them. They had chosen Mitt Romney. It was basically a coronation at Fox News. And I will tell you that behind the scenes, it was well known that you were not welcome if you issued the criticisms of Mitt Romney that I think were very valid, namely that we know now he's a wiener. And Fox News, whenever you're with a network, it frames what you are allowed. I don't want to say, they don't come down and say, hey, Tucker, tell them you're a libertarian today. Then they go, hey, tell them you're a populist and hate libertarians today.
Well,
what does happen is they say, hey, this is what's working with ratings. This is what people are receptive to, and this is what's required for a multi-billion-dollar corporation to continue succeeding if you want that nice slot. He doesn't own any of his shows. A lot of people at Fox News don't even own the rights to their own name. You need to be clear about that. So these people, I'm not saying they're mouthpieces for someone else or for a network, but when you look at a track record over time and you go, the views did change based on where the check was coming from, that does give one pause, especially when combined with the fact that I don't know how any conservative goes out and attacks Sidney Powell before this suit is filed. I don't understand it. And when you combine that with remarkable inconsistency, I can see why some people might be upset. Here's another one, by the way, some more information for people out there. It was only after taking over the Kelly slot at Fox News that he really did start going all in on Trump, because I remember when I used to appear on Fox News. And this was back, I think, Trump ran in the primary in the year there was Santorum and Mitt Romney. Oh, wow. So we went through it back then.
And we all laughed.
And now we see him, he was a libertarian on the war, and you even look at his arguments on drugs, and you look at his arguments on national defense and where he was hawkish and where he wasn't. And now, he holds very big government views, which again, I would just say are inconsistent with not only a conservative viewpoint, but the viewpoint that he espoused not that long ago. Here he is on the Ben Shapiro show at Daily Wire saying that if he were president, he would use absolute power to simply ban self-driving cars.
Would you, Tucker Carlson,
be in favor of restrictions on the ability of trucking companies to use this sort of technology specifically to, sort of artificially maintain the number of jobs that are available in the trucking industry.
Are you joking? In a second. In a second.
Okay, but let's give him a pass.
So mad.
Ben has that.
Yeah.
Ben has that over. He has that quality.
He does. Yeah. Well,
Ben tends to have that effect over people.
Yeah.
he finds the button. And
Brow was so furrowed.
pushes it.
My gosh.
He was like the unibrow
Angry.
baby in The Simpsons. Now that might just seem like, well, he's only being big government there because he's pro-working man, right? He's a protectionist,
Truckers.
just like tariffs, truckers. And so some people go, Made in America sticker. Tucker Carlson is one of us. Great. I understand that that's a new sort of populist worldview. I don't think it's very consistent with a conservative worldview. However, I understand why people might maintain that position. However, there are other examples of big government, I would sort of say liberal, leftist authoritarian tendencies. As you see, we talked about it on the show, which was pretty upsetting to me that at that time, no longer the number one conservative show, was advocating for COVID panic. Here you have him in February talking about predictions of over 1 million deaths in the United States. And he actually went on to brag that he had brought this information to Donald Trump and told him that he needed to take action sooner than he had. Here's that clip.
But nevertheless, 70% of the world's population is a big number. In fact, it's 5.4 billion people. Currently, the coronavirus appears to kill about 2% of the people who have it. So let's be generous for a moment and imagine that asymptomatic carriers are not detected and the real death rate is only, say, 0.5%. That would be 1/4 of the current estimates. Even under that scenario, there would still be 27 million deaths from coronavirus globally. In this country, more than 1 million would die.
Does that seem like fear porn to you? And here's what's important. Contrast that with what he says about the pandemic now. Was there ever a, I was wrong? Because this was, keep in mind, before the completely discredited Imperial College study of London.
Right.
Oh, wow.
Well, if we just keep counting, though, we might actually get to 1 million at some
Right.
point. If we
If
just
you roll
lump
in
all
flu
of them,
and heart attacks,
and motorcycle
stair trips.
accidents where you coughed right before you hit the wall.
Just, I mean,
think,
look
so.
at, the flu clearly just changed into COVID because of how many we have no flu deaths now, basically.
Right.
It's amazing.
We've gotten rid of the flu. We've never been able to do that.
Miracle of modern science.
And here's the one thing, like this is one thing this is also why we mentioned that we'll never be doing rebuttals to the Young Turks because this isn't really punching. I don't want to use this term, but I always believe in at least punching up. People have asked what my view is on Tucker Carlson. Obviously, Tucker Carlson is far more well-established than we've been, at least for a longer period of time, with a network with far more firepower. Another sort of some inside baseball, there are people who have been blacklisted if they appear on Newsmax and Fox News. That's conjecture, but I can tell you what, there absolutely is a blacklisting with people at Fox News because I can tell you that from yours truly. I can tell you that from people here on our network over at The Blaze, people who are not allowed to appear on Fox News if it's seen as competitive. So this is not, you need to understand that Fox News is not in this for some ideology, it's in it for a profit, and there was a niche market where they have a stranglehold, and they're now starting to lose that stranglehold. But you may be asking yourself some questions. Why isn't this guest on Fox News? Why isn't this guest on Tucker? He doesn't have the ability. Tucker does not have the ability to host any guests that he wants. He doesn't have the ability to appear anywhere that he wants. That's not his fault. That's the contract that he signed.
Right.
Now, again, we look at this and you go, okay, maybe he's looking out for the working man when he talks about banning self-driving cars. But when combined with the fact that he was advocating, I don't necessarily know that you would call them draconian lockdowns, but certainly measures more severe than most of you, including Tucker Carlson, now are rebelling against, you would have to say there's remarkable inconsistency. Yeah. When you look at someone and say, okay, he was pro-Iraq war until he was against the war in Iraq, you can say, okay, that's a change of opinion, I understand it. But then when you take it again in tandem with what we've already gone over with COVID and banning self-driving cars and drugs and Sydney Powell and the situation of being a libertarian versus being a populist, you go, well, hold on a second, it just seems like this keeps changing from CNN to MSNBC to Fox News, pre-Trump to Fox News post-Trump, and then it seems like his views have changed depending on whether he can get a scoop from Sydney Powell or not. Listen, we wanted to have Sydney Powell on the show. We couldn't have her on. My opinions on Sydney Powell have not changed. Yeah. Our opinions on COVID have not changed. My opinion on the Constitution of the United States and this election have not changed. My opinion on abusing executive powers to simply ban something you don't like has not changed.
Yeah, and to be clear, we're not punching at Tucker Carlson right now. We're not going after him. We're addressing...
This is belabored. I didn't want to do this, but it's one of those things where people are... Listen, the ratings have gone down dramatically. Yeah. People feel as though Fox News may not be in their corner, and they don't feel as though they're getting a straight a straight scoop from people. As someone who worked there for over 4 years, I think that there are a lot of great people there, but you can't just assume that some giant corporate entity and all of their personalities by default are on your side.
Yeah.
And do a little digging, you'll see that not even consistent on which side they're on.
Yeah, and in that clip, he actually said the reason that we're reporting on it is because it's true, right? And okay, he had a point there. He could have done it in a different way. That's the exact same thing that we're doing. There's a reason we're talking about this, because these things are true. We're not saying that Tucker Carlson's a bad guy. You should never listen to him again. But he made some missteps here, and you need to know that that's not just a one-off.
Right.
And these are true things.
And this happens with conservatives virtue signaling, where it's like, look, I am better than you because I'm going to call you out even though you're a conservative. Good example would be, I am sure that, let's say we find out it was just some kind of a clerical error with the voter registration, my personal voter registration, which I've said, 99% chance I'm just doing it wrong, like my grandmother with a VCR. Yeah. But someone coming out going, actually, that's just an accidental double count, and I'm a professional analyst, and you didn't get this right, therefore you're a fraud. That's what you see a lot of in the conservative movement, because that wouldn't even be accurate. I've allowed room for myself to be incorrect.
Right, exactly.
When someone does that, like you do with Sydney Powell, like Tucker Carlson did, you undercut them, you undercut the movement, you undercut people who are fighting for constitutional freedoms of the United States, and I don't see how that benefits anyone, which is why I avoided doing this very topic, because I think that as a general rule, I like a world where Tucker Carlson exists more than where he doesn't. Same thing, I have disagreements with Ben Shapiro on a whole lot. People say, well, why haven't you voiced your disagreements with him? Have you seen him on the show? Listen, it's not always serenading with Ben, and I get that his dad was a composer. The point is, I prefer a world where there's Ben Shapiro versus no Ben Shapiro.
Right, yeah.
I don't agree with Candace Owens, but I prefer a world where there's a Candace Owens as opposed to no Candace Owens. Good for her on winning that censorship issue with the fact checkers. I don't agree with Glenn Beck and everything, but I prefer a world where there's a Tucker Carlson, a Glenn Beck, a Mark Levin, a Candace Owens, a Ben Shapiro, and myself than without them. However, when you have some of those people, as we've seen with Tucker Carlson, in several instances, taking pot shots at other people who he too should want to see amongst our ranks, combined with the intellectual inconsistency over time, it just rubs me the wrong way. Much like Al Gore rubs the masseuse the wrong way, if that's the wrong way, sign me up.
Watch Good Morning Mug Club live every Monday through Thursday at 10:15 Eastern.